Minnesota Technical Assistance Program, correct? Isn't that right? Yeah. So
yep, you got it.
Right. The MnTAP program has been going for 37 years now, and it has been focused successfully on developing water conservation solutions for Minnesota businesses and organizations. In my mind, this program is one of those things where the rubber meets the road. They're able to take, what we know about water conservation and what works and actually apply it, with their interaction through businesses and the intern program. Matt Domski is the intern program manager for MnTAP. He began with MnTAP as an intern during the summer of 2012 and came on full-time later that year to focus on waste prevention and diversion projects. His work with solid waste has opened pathways to projects focused on water conservation and wastewater loading management with a variety of industries. And we also have with us Brent Vizanko. I'm pronouncing that correctly, am I not, Brent?
Yep, that was good.
Great. Brent is an associate engineer with the MnTAP program, and he served as an intern in the 2016 intern program year. And after a year and a half of drifting off into environmental consulting industry, he decided to come back to MnTAP, in his words, starting in 2018, to pursue his passion for water conservation and waste reduction. He has always been focused on water conservation, starting with his intern project, and he continues to pursue water and wastewater projects. You guys, welcome to our seminar, and looking forward to what you have to tell us about the MnTAP program. Take it away.
All right, thanks, Mark. I think you did a better introduction than we might give, but we'll still go through that in a little bit here. So we'll be talking here about kind of how we've expanded our industrial water efficiency through site assessments and intern projects. So we'll kind of get into that. So a little bit of an overview of what we'll be talking about today. We'll talk again about the overview of MnTAP. I don't know if we'll do any better than Mark, but we'll try to give you an overview of what we do. And then we'll get into kind of how we find water efficiency opportunities, where we look, what we look for, and then kind of the four-part approach that we use for technical assistance. And then we'll move into kind of those two pieces that we've talked about, assessments and intern projects, how we utilize these two services to develop solutions. And then we'll kind of give some examples of what those solutions are and what they look like. And then we'll reach forward into how we're looking to refine our approach to water conservation and water efficiency, as well as some new opportunities that we look to kind of expand the communities and audiences that we are working with. So a little bit more about the Minnesota Technical Assistance Program. This is our mission statement here. Pretty straightforward. Again, we're looking to strengthen Minnesota businesses by providing efficiency upgrades while saving money through energy, water, and waste prevention. So I think that's the key part here. We're going to focus here on water conservation, but we also, as a group, work on energy and waste prevention as well. So, like Mark said, we've been around about 37 years now. We are located in the School of Public Health at the University of Minnesota as an outreach and assistance unit. We're completely grant and partner funded, and primarily through the MPCA. So again, we really thank those at the MPCA for that. We couldn't do what we do without that, obviously. So, and then we offer confidential, no-cost engineering assistance to Minnesota businesses. So we're very lucky in the position that we're in at the university, as well as being funded by grants to offer no-cost assistance. And then, like I said, we offer that through both site assessments, intern projects, and then something called teams. We won't talk about it much, but it's another kind of avenue for us to provide our services. So the water conservation work that we have done has been in partnership with the Metropolitan Council, Environmental Services. We came together about 10 years ago, and this slide kind of presents the two pieces, right, that we come together and form kind of a cohesive unit. So from the Metropolitan side, or the Metropolitan Council side, they provide kind of the research and the kind of background of what we are looking to do. They also provide the financial support, which is obviously very, very crucial. And then, their goal is to preserve the resources that we have, the groundwater and the surface water, to provide clean drinking water in the future. And then obviously provide the technical staff, the experience, and then kind of our mission of reducing energy and water throughout the state. So through the partnership with the Metropolitan Council, I think it was about 5-6 years ago now, we did a study basically to look at the motivations and barriers that Minnesota businesses have towards water conservation or water efficiency. So on the left here, you got the motivations. So starting with kind of corporate goals and sustainability, so kind of doing the right thing. Process improvements and cost savings are a big one, and we'll talk about that probably the most out of any of these. And then obviously regulations are a motivator as well. And then the barriers that we found were project costs being the biggest one, lack of time, kind of resources to implement and to really look into these things, as well as technical complications. I think these barriers really make a lot of sense, and they're the ones that we would expect, but it was good to do the report and do the study to find these as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about process improvements and then cost savings here. So water is a limited resource. I'm sure this is not new to anyone, but we'll kind of go through what water really costs. So to any user, it costs usually 3 times. So what most people think of as the cost of water would be the incoming supply cost, right? The typically like $4 to $5 per 1,000 gallons that you're paying that comes up on your bill and is typically pretty apparent. And then the next two are kind of the big ones that we tend to find, being processing costs. So how much does it cost to purify, heat, cool, pump, treat that water once it gets into your facility, which can be as much or greater than the cost, the supply cost from the utility, and then the cost to discharge as well. So that sewer charge is also typically right around the cost of the supply cost. So again, these 3 costs can be right around the same order of magnitude. So your cost for water could be 3 times as much as you might be thinking it is at the beginning. So gives us a real impetus to present these conservation opportunities. So now that we know the cost of water, we've identified that. So the next step would be to find where water is being used. So here are a couple examples. We'll go through a couple slides here of examples of where we typically find water use in the industries and the places that we find. So first would be washing and rinsing. So pots and pans here on the left, to pressure washing here in the middle. We see a lot of these things around. Hoses are pretty common, just to kind of wash things off, rinse things out. And then the photo on the right is a rinse tank. So lots of water being used there. And then, these kind of, I think, are a little bit more specific to the food industry. But again, we see a lot of food facilities. And so in those facilities, they might use water for transporting product, processing the product, as an actual ingredient in whatever they're producing. And then the fourth one here, sanitation, is typically a pretty big one that we find with a pretty good opportunity usually for conservation. The next place we usually find water would be cooling and heating. So the picture on the left there is a cooling tower used for kind of cooling loops. And then heating, you think of steam. Steam is just water. So we find some water use there as well. And then the last one here, second to last one here, water treatment and purification. This here on the right is a reverse osmosis skid. So typically water purification treatment has some sort of reject water. So that's typically what we're looking for when it comes to that, these types of processes. Now, finally, landscape irrigation or domestic uses. So, again, not the typical industrial water use, but something we do see often is irrigation of land, of turf, and then domestic uses like toilets and sinks and showers. So now that we found all those pieces of water, we're probably kind of like the guy here on the left. What do we do with that information? So we've found all the water sources and we've maybe quantified them, but now Matt will talk about kind of the process that we take in identifying those water uses a little bit more in depth, and then also how do we use that information to provide solutions to conserve that water.
Great, thank you, Brent. All right, so now what we're going to get into is talk a little bit about how MnTAP characterizes the opportunities we seek out at these facilities. And for a long time with water assistance, we were trying to think of a way to sum up how we can provide a variety of recommendations to facilities. And what we came up with was this, what we call like a 4-part strategy, the 4 M's, if you will. And those are map, maintain, manage, and modify. Now, mapping, that first stage, this can really be independent of the other 3. This is usually a very important step before getting to recommendations that fall under those following 3 categories. However, we might actually make some recommendations to a facility that help them map the water a bit better, so that they can sustain implementing some of these recommendations as they move forward. They can find new opportunities. And that mapping stage is really crucial to get a picture of what your opportunities are. With the other 3, with maintenance, this is more on the side of leaks, looking at equipment and things that may be producing water loss, that you can make some small tweaks to really save that water. The managed side of things, this could be smaller equipment upgrades, things that take a little bit less effort to implement that still yield some great water savings. And then on the modify side, this might involve a little bit more involved process modification solutions that take a little more planning, a little more time to implement, but can yield some excellent savings. So we will revisit this slide once more, and I'll give you a little more summary and context as to the importance of having this variety. But we'll get into some examples of how these come into play when we're out visiting facilities. So just to touch on the mapping side quickly here, this is really our chance to identify and validate opportunities for each individual site. We prefer to start either our assessments or our intern projects with a water balance, really understanding how water is moving through a facility, through a system. And how we do that is we might get some data from our site contacts. We might have to take some meter readings of our own. We do have some equipment where we can measure flow rates. And sometimes we may need to pull out the bucket and stopwatch to actually get some very source accurate measurements as we go through our assessment. So if we have a good water balance, moving on to some of these types of solutions we're looking at, leak identification and repair on the maintenance side of things. This is something you're going to find almost anywhere. In homes, in commercial, industrial facilities, leaks happen. Equipment goes bad, fittings and hoses fail. And the key here is really understanding, having a good system in place to identify these, to repair them as quick as you can, and then repeat that process. So at times we might be working with a facility to set up a good program in that regard if they have a system prone to leaks, especially. On the management side of things, a lot of times we push as much as we can for water-free cleanup. So for example, in a lot of the food processing facilities, it's advantageous to sweep up something that hits the floor, get it into a bin before you have to hit the floor with water. And, you know, it's not only a water savings, but it really can save a lot of time as well, depending on the type of product you're dealing with. Things can gum up on the floor and they can be really a pain to try and get clean with just water. So no water cleanup is definitely something we recommend. Another thing on the management scale solutions, we look at fixtures. Brent mentioned hoses earlier, but you know, maybe on things like wash sinks. I don't know about anyone else, but these two fixtures, looking at them for the first time, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you which one is the lower flow version. And in many cases, for a process that you may just be rinsing things down, you really only need a certain flow to do that. There are some instances where you may need to fill up a tub in a certain amount of time, which we understand. But there are instances where you don't quite need the flow rate you might need, or you don't quite need the flow rate that's given to you to do the job you have. So we look at kind of specific situations where we can swap out some of these fixtures. Sort of on the fixture side as well, we might look to pressure washing. You know, you can do a lot with high pressure, low volume nozzles. They're not great in all instances. This is, you know, it does depend on the process, but can be a good savings. And then valves. So on our left, we have a pretty common ball valve. What we've found in facilities, interestingly, is a lot of times a process is given a certain flow rate. You know, a valve fully open allows so much water to come through. But some of these processes really only need a little. And so we've looked at mechanisms to limit those flow rates, whether it's a chart like the one on the right, something you can attach to this ball valve. Sometimes there are mechanical stoppers that can limit how much you can open that valve. But really the key here is there's opportunity to optimize flow rates. Sometimes you need to question, do you really need the entire flow that you're given for a particular process? And in many cases, the answer is no. Okay, little bit of an example here that crosses a solution that's both a water management and a process modification side of things. So this is an example from an intern project, I think about 2 years ago. And on the left, the diagram we have depicts a product tank that's cleaned in a closed loop fashion. So if you can imagine, water and chemical is filled into this tank and is recirculated through piping through a series of pumps into this tank. And so the case with this process was the water needed to reach a certain temperature for compliance. And what was happening was the temperature probe for this process was located at the middle of the tank. So the facility was used to just filling this tank roughly to the middle with water to trigger that temperature probe, to trigger the cleaning process. Well, what they found out was they didn't actually need that much water for the process. So a solution here was to change where that temperature probe was. They were able to install an inline probe in the piping system. And that way, if you look at this darker shaded portion of the tank, that triangular lower portion of the tank, that depicts essentially the amount of water that really was needed for the process. So this is just an example of a way to tweak the process, change a piece of equipment, to gain some long-term water savings, and really just identifying, what do we really need to run these different processes. Now, jumping back to an example on how mapping has been useful for a facility, and this is kind of a two-part example here. And in the first stage, the diagram at your right, quite detailed. This was a pretty detailed water map of the facility. They're not always this detailed, but an intern did an excellent job at this. And what this allowed us to do was really get a broad picture of what the opportunities were at the site and how to prioritize them. So we were able to analyze the percentages of usage across this roughly 22 million gallon per year usage for the facility. So that map led us into looking at a few opportunities. And one of those was looking at sanitation rooms that this facility had. And they had 4 different sanitation rooms that accounted for about 15% of the site's total usage. So, using that water map, we pinpointed a need, and the intern was able to identify some solutions for those specific sanitation rooms, such as high efficiency nozzles, spray balls that wash equipment and recirculate it. And this gave us some nice savings. And this was just one piece of that facility. Okay, so just to revisit the slide once more, our 4-part process for defining water opportunities. I wanted to pull this back up just to touch on the value. And the big thing here is each facility we work with is going to be at a different phase in their development. If you have a well-established facility that's doing very well with lots of management support to make improvements, they might be able to implement as many modification solutions that we can throw at them. But that is not always the case. As you would imagine, we work with a variety of sizes of facilities. We need a variety of solutions. And that really helps us give them a bit of a game plan for how to gain water efficiency in the short term, but also how to look at the bigger picture and implement some really nice process changes down the road. So that variety is really big for us, and this structure helps us do that. Now, Brent touched on the fact that we have kind of these 2 main functions. We have a full-time staff that do site assessments of our own. We have intern projects as well. And really the main difference, the big difference is the time that we have to dedicate to these. We really can get a lot done with our own site assessments. A half day to a full day, and doing a few visits over the course of time, that can really help us give a good plan to a facility. But as you can imagine, 3 months with a full-time intern can really come up with some excellent solutions. So it's very helpful for us to have these 2 capabilities as an organization. So whether we are conducting this work through our assessments or through our interns, our kind of simple process is to start by mapping and diagramming the usage, as I mentioned. We then really want to gain some perspective from the facilities we're working with. When we're going into sites, we don't know everything. We're not pretending to do. We want to learn from them so we can help them. And so that's a huge piece of this, is getting the right team at the facility together, understanding what's going on, and sometimes helping them identify what the solutions are. And ultimately, we really want to give them a game plan, give our best estimates for savings, note where there are some gaps. So be honest with where we're making assumptions, And then finally, we really want to outline plans to implement these solutions. So give them as good of a process as we can to achieve implementation. And finally, we do follow up with these facilities, whether it's an assessment or an intern project. We want to stay in touch to make sure that we can be a resource to them and to see how things have gone. So through our process, whether it's intern projects or assessments, we really aim to have a variety of benefits in a variety of ways. And the obvious may be the benefits we provide to the businesses, but beyond the businesses, some of these businesses are in communities that may be water stressed or may have issues with wastewater effluent. And this is something we really pay attention to is how can we impact the communities as well as the individual businesses. And then through our intern projects, we're giving them a great chance to lead their own projects and gain some firsthand experience, really acting as a contract engineer, contract professional, giving them a chance to have a real stake in what happens at a particular facility. And we really admire that, the work that they do and the opportunities that they have. So I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a visual as to, in general, some of the reach of the program. And this is from 2015 to 2019, kind of pre-pandemic 4-year shot. We do a lot of work in the Twin Cities Metro, but we get out to Greater Minnesota. A big piece of what we do is really trying to push our solutions as broadly as we can within the bounds of the state. And if we're looking at water, we've been fortunate to recommend about 640 million gallons of water conservation solutions in that 4-year span, with about 184 million gallons implemented. And as you can imagine, not every recommendation gets implemented, but Brent mentioned refining our process, and really what we're doing is we're trying to understand how we can be effective and how we can increase that implementation percentage. And a lot of this comes from understanding the needs of facilities, understanding the needs of communities, and adapting our process to reach those, whether that's virtually, in-person assessments, intern projects. We're kind of constantly analyzing our process so that we can better serve these communities. Now, just to talk about some interesting projects that are in progress and upcoming. One that is in progress, we are working on a database of water conservation recommendations. And last summer, we completed phase 1. We had an intern do some great work evaluating what historical recommendations are that MnTAP has made around water efficiency, and kind of categorizing those in terms of their results, but also how often they're implemented. We're really trying to take a look at the data so that we can organize this stuff into a database, which is the phase for this summer. And ultimately, we would like to have a tool for businesses and communities to search through to use these solutions. So, it's great for us to work directly with businesses through assessments and intern projects, but we want to make sure these things we learn are easy to replicate for others. And one way to do that is through web resources and now potentially a tool specific to water conservation. So stay tuned for more on that as we continue this project. And one more project that we are hoping does go through is Brent and I have been involved in developing a project that takes our water assistance to greater Minnesota. And we have the ability to work with businesses anywhere in the state as is, but we are limited in our time and funding to travel for those specific assessments, for those specific training opportunities. So should we receive this grant, this would give us an amazing opportunity to really dedicate more time to water further out state in Minnesota. So we're excited for that opportunity, and we're hopeful that we will have that. All right, now just to kind of sum things up here, I would encourage you to consider attending our intern symposium in August. This is a great chance to get a closer look at what we do, what our interns do, and the amazing work they are currently doing this summer. And just to give you a little bit of a snapshot of the projects that will be featured, this is likely the final list. But yeah, we have some great projects this summer. We're proud of them. 5 of those will be specific to water conservation. Some of the others will have water elements, but these span anything from waste prevention, energy efficiency, process efficiency, and pollution prevention. So just a shameless plug there. Please consider attending. The registration link, I believe, might now be live. And if you are interested, that should be right on our website. Otherwise, I would be happy to share that with you. So that's what we have. Thank you so much for featuring us today. We really appreciate the opportunity to share the work that we do, and we're really looking forward to expanding this in the years to come. Thank you.
Well, that's really, really interesting stuff, Matt and Brent. Thanks so much for sharing that information with us. I had no idea of the extent of the savings that you've been able to achieve through the work that you've done. It's just pretty amazing. If you go back to that slide that you showed on the water and energy savings, that seems to me worth focusing on again. 183 million gallons of water over that 4-year period. Is that what we're talking about there?
Yes, yeah, that's the 2015 to 2019 savings. Yep.
That's a few swimming pools worth of water.
I'll also add that those are, each of these numbers, the way that we calculate them, they're gallons of water saved annually. So, a recommendation that we make to a company will be, do this thing, and then you'll save this much water annually. So, it's 183 million gallons per year that they're saving.
Per year. Wow.
That they're continuing to save, right? Because they've implemented whatever we've told them, whatever the recommendation was. So now they're continuing to save those millions of gallons collectively.
For anyone who has questions for Matt or Brent, type them into the chat, and ask these guys what's on your mind.
And I just put in what I think is the accurate symposium link in the chat. So looks like there is a button to register for that too.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The other
actually, go ahead, Mark. Oh, it looks like you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I was muted. The thing I found exciting was the opportunities that you're offering interns to go out there and actually do some pretty impressive work with companies out there. How many interns do you typically hire and use during one of your years?
So this summer we have 15 projects, and I would say the last few years or so, we've been in the range of 15 to 20. We actually had our largest year last year. I think we had 20 or 21 projects. which was a lot, but it was fantastic. When the program began, it was a lot smaller, but again, through great support through the MPCA, MCES, and just kind of our ability to see the value in connecting businesses with these bright interns, and just developing a process, it's grown tremendously. And so, yeah, we're sitting at about 15 to 20 a year on average.
That's great. I was curious, how do you guys identify the companies, and what's that process look like, and how you reach out to them and see if they're interested in going through this process with you or your interns?
So it can happen in a variety of ways. We have, just kind of word of mouth, I guess, and connections between across industries and businesses that hear of the program. That's one way. We do have our own dedicated outreach. So for example, for like the 5 water conservation projects we've been doing per summer, we do have some outreach to communities where businesses, where, potentially like high water using communities that have businesses that may be interested in working with us. We will actually do some direct outreach. We have some repeat companies occasionally, but we really do try and encourage new companies. We want to really spread the opportunity as much as we can. But yeah, in short, it's a bit of a variety. People learn about the program, we do some outreach, and then we also have, I guess, our agency and county, city partners that are great in getting the word out as well.
That's neat. Do you ever do any follow-up with the companies once they've gone through your program and they've implemented some of the recommendations? Do you kind of follow up and see how things are going and needing any tweaks? Or
yeah, so we have a 2-year minimum follow-up. So once every intern project is complete, I think we start off with, it's like 3 months out or maybe 6 months out, we have a follow-up. And then from there, it's at least once a year, and it kind of depends on the opportunity. But that's a great question. We absolutely want to follow on with them to make sure that what the interns have put forth is taken seriously, and we have a great chance of implementing the solutions. And every instance is a little bit different. Some companies are in a better position to implement than others. But that's why the follow-up is so important, because sometimes there's a chance for us to lend a little more support to a particular recommendation where we can then help ease the process of getting some of those things complete at the sites. But yes, follow-up is crucial.
yeah.
And I'll just add quick to that, the intern projects are really where we find a lot of our recommendations, and it's where we see a lot more implementation. I think that's one, because the interns on site pushing implementation, but then also the follow-up. So yeah, follow-up is super crucial, like Matt said.
That's great. We do have a question in the chat. Have you done the projects with local or small businesses?
Yes, yes, we have. And, I guess so we do have a lot of work in the metro, where, I would say the sweet spot maybe for who we can assist is the small to medium sized business is probably the best target for what we do. As far as, quite small businesses, we have had some dedicated air quality projects that have focused on things like brake cleaners and degreasers, sanitation chemicals, cleaning chemicals, where we've had partnerships with some community organizations, where we've been able to work with multiple small businesses over the course of the summer, to help them find some kind of smaller, easier to implement solutions, changes to the products they're using. But yeah, we absolutely work with local and small businesses, and that's very important to us. to help, especially help those that may not be able to afford the assistance from, say, a private consultant.
You know, I'm kind of wondering, you know, when your interns or you go into a business to consult on some of these, do you typically find that you know, the management or you know or the company is thinking, oh yeah, we've had our eyes on this for quite a while, and yeah, we've been thinking the same thing, and you know, really be happy to work with you on this? Or is it, wow, we never even thought of that, or we never really thought that this was costing us this kind of money? Or is it, there's a range of those responses?
It's a range. Yeah, and Brent, I can have you jump in on this in a sec, but yeah, that's a great question, Mark. And it sometimes it's the case where they really just kind of need someone to help map things out, help them come up with a plan. They might know, you know, they might know what needs to be done in a general sense, and we can help them characterize that and create a plan to actually get some things completed. But there are instances where, you know, some businesses, and you know, to no fault of their own, you get very close to a process. Your job is to put product in a bag and get it out the door. You might miss opportunities, and that's natural, and it's another way that we can come in and kind of be a second set of eyes too.
The reason I ask is because, you know, you had some compelling slides there of, you know, how companies can save water and energy and money through these very simple, you know, fixes, you know, like fixing leaks. And we often hear, I think, not only through the MPCA, you know, and what we can do, but communities and cities that have to be pumping water out to these industries and households. You know, you can save a lot of money in water if you just fix those leaks. We hear it all the time, and yet you can go into a company, find a lot of leaks that really don't seem to be addressed. And I'm kind of curious, is it just that they get so busy on, like you were saying, well, you know, we don't have time to address that leak right now, maybe later, or they just don't see it as a real problem, you know?
So, and one thing on the leaks is I think it's definitely something that, you know, we have seen instances where there maybe isn't a really good program to keep track of them and just act on them quickly. Or, you know, they might be in a part of the facility that isn't frequently visited, so then they miss them. That's part of it. But I guess I'll say, you know, it maybe would have been helpful for me to show more of a distribution of the recommendations. We do, the leaks are a part of things, but I think we're not constantly seeing facilities that have gigantic problems identifying and repairing those. But the reason we don't want to gloss over it is it's such a, like, it's a simple, like, no-brainer type thing that we all can get complacent with. And so I think that's why we make a point to have that be a piece of our strategy is, you know, before all else, make sure your equipment isn't leaking, you know, make sure it's maintained and operating properly.
I still think that people, there's still the tendency not to value water as much as we should. I think, you know, we went through the kind of 3 different costs of water, and I think that to most people still that the incoming supply cost is pretty much the one that gets thought of. It's not the, you know, we have an RO system, but the cost is low. You know, if you have treatment in your facility, you're probably paying more than you think for water on a per gallon basis. So I think the cost is a little bit hard for some people to think about. I think also, you know, leaks, people sometimes know that they're there, but again, they're not prioritizing them like they would, you know, like if there was an electricity thing that they've seen, or there was a natural gas opportunity that they've seen, you know, they don't they don't put the same value to water as they do other things. So I do think that's a big thing. And I think that's a lot what we offer, right? Is we can come in, we can quantify things, and we can provide a cost that is a number rather than just a general awareness. So I think a lot of people know, we'll go into a site and they'll kind of know where water is being used in kind of general quantities, but that's where the value here of mapping and quantifying, and they're like, oh, I didn't realize that process was using that much water. You see it every day, but you might not know the exact quantities and magnitudes. And I think that really helps people understand.
Yeah, putting numbers to the issue instead of, hey, you should save water.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
I would think that some of these business owners at the end of this process might be some of your strongest advocates. Look, working with these guys saved us, X amount of dollars every year. It's worth it. Sign up. Do you ever use those guys to advertise your abilities and services? Like, talk to Joe over here. He knows. He knows what we can do for you.
Yeah, just a quick example is we've, some folks in industry, they might make their way to new facilities. So we've had some advocates that might have worked at a particular food processor that have moved to 3 or 4 different companies, and we get a call and then they say, oh, I'm here now, and it's kind of a nice surprise, and that's a new industry to partner with. So that does happen. And another thing is we have a publication we do on the intern program at the end of each year, and that's a really nice summary of the work that the interns do, but it also showcases, I think in there we have some quotes from companies based on their real experience and the value it brings to them. So yeah, it's an excellent point, Mark, and we they are our champions, and a lot of times are willing to share how the program has been helpful to them.
Well, and as a good example of that, in my introduction of you both, you have both been interns in the past, and here you are back again because you think it's a very valuable program. To me, that's testament right there that this works. Otherwise, you wouldn't be coming back to it.
Absolutely.
So I know you touched on a couple of different industries that obviously use water, but would you say overall there was one industry that tends to be like a higher effectiveness or efficiency in implementing some of these water conservation techniques, or does it really kind of vary depending on the industry and the size? Or would you say like the food industry in general is one that you could tend to get more of these benefits from?
That's a great question. Brent, feel free to jump in on this if you have any thoughts, but I think the food industry is a big one in terms of use. Lots of sanitation, lots of potentially moving product, using it as an input. And sometimes what we are battling a little bit the quality side of things, the sanitation requirement side of things. But what we have learned, and that is often possible, is using more hot water doesn't necessarily mean cleaner. And so I think that's an example of why you can gain such great savings in the food industry is, there are some more efficient ways to do things, whether that's in a closed loop fashion, whether you're just monitoring when you're shutting off certain water streams, whether it's water used to cool equipment. An example of this could be, we've had facilities where they have water cooled equipment and it's not automated, and you have workers that are required to turn that off at the end of the day. And if this is a Friday and it gets left on and the facility shut down, that can be quite a waste that we're missing out on over the weekend. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think the food industry is a big one. I'm trying to think here, maybe metal finishing. Brent, any other key ones that you can think of?
I was trying to look. So through that supplemental project that we're kind of in the middle of, that kind of that based tool that we talked about, Matt talked about at the end there. Last year, an intern worked on basically taking all of the data that we've collected through the last 10 years of water conservation opportunities and compiling it. And I'm trying to think what she recommended. I know there was some tables in there that was like broken down by industry, and I can look for those and we can send that over. But we've done some work on that in kind of which industries have most opportunity, and then also kind of which ones, like you said, kind of implement more often, or kind of have I don't want to, not just the industry, it's mostly like the industries that have the easiest implementation, right? Because like we talked about the management modification, there's a third one. But basically, those are in different degrees of complexity. So different industries might have kind of more low-hanging fruit than others do. And I don't remember exactly what there. I feel like food processing is probably one of them that has a lot of low-hanging fruit. And that's why we've done a lot of work with them. And they've been able to implement a lot of really good savings as well. So
That's great.
But
And I know that obviously long-term cost savings is one of the things that an individual company would look at in kind of determining which of the recommendations they could implement. But I was wondering, are there any like grant opportunities through MnTAP or other avenues to help maybe fund some of that upfront initial capital investment on some of these opportunities to implement more water conservation, just to help? Or is that kind of up to the company?
That's another great question. We, I think the Met Council, there may have been some industrial assistance programs. I don't know how large that is right now, but there have been a couple of partners that we've worked with that have been able to obtain funds for larger scale changes related to water conservation. But I think you bring up an excellent point that, for some of especially some of the larger changes, there might be a need there to really push the implementation, push change with these solutions. I think Brent when he talks about the 3-part cost of water, we really have to really be thorough with that analysis for that very reason of, some of these things, just looking at the supply side of water might not be enough. And a lot of times though, some of these savings involve a lot of embedded energy savings, and energy, we get a lot more savings out of that. So if we can tie in the energy component, the water treatment component, we can really make a better case for making the changes and a good payback on them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think,
yeah. Go ahead. Right, you got it. Okay. I was just gonna say, I think that generally speaking, in the water conservation world, compared to like the energy conservation or the waste reduction, we find a lot of low to no cost solutions. Like I think when you're thinking of water solutions, a lot of it involves like putting on like a $200 valve, or making some smaller adjustments that save a lot of water. So I think it is usually actually surprisingly easy to justify these recommendations. But then, like Matt was saying, again, we do a very thorough look, and we have the interns do a very thorough look at what the cost of water looks like, because that really can make or break how these recommendations get viewed and how they get implemented.
Well, we're just about out of time here. That really was informative. I just think you're doing enormously important work out there with some real demonstrated effects. I think it's exciting to see the kind of work that you're doing and the kind of results you're able to achieve. We also have to say that this is Liz's last water issues seminar that she's going to be hosting with us.
Where's Liz? I only see Brooke.
And we're certainly going to miss Liz. She has been doing tireless work along with Brooke and myself, in getting these seminars put together and getting them out to everybody. Liz, we're going to miss you a great deal.
Well, thanks, Mark. I'll still be around. I'll be at the talks. Just turning over the keys to somebody else to help coordinate them. So,
Yeah, well, we're going to miss you. Thanks a lot for the
thanks,
work.
Mark. Thank you.
And for everyone else out there,
Okay.
you know, when you do have ideas on topics that you'd like to hear about, shoot us an email. Let us know. You know, we kind of thrive on the ideas that you have to put these seminars together instead of trying to dream up everything on our own. So if you have ideas, let us know, and we'll do our best to put something together. Matt and Brent, thanks again so much for the talk. I learned a lot, and I think it's really inspiring stuff. Thanks for the work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. We
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thank you.
Yeah. All right. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right. See you guys later.